Choosing the yarn is the most important part of a knitting project. Wrong fiber, you're not going to want to wear it. Wrong color, you'll say it doesn't match anything. Wrong weight, you'll spend weeks making something that doesn't fit. And wrong price, friend, you might just quit knitting altogether. So many rules, and without Joanns, there's no one to talk to about knitting, and all the information online about yarn is so confusing. And why does it matter? Yarn is just yarn, right? Is exactly what I would say if I hadn't created the ultimate guide for knitters, how to buy good yarn online. Friend, go grab your whip. We have a lot to talk about. It is very difficult to buy yarn when you have no idea what it will be used for. So step one, choose a knit. Now there are a few ways we can approach this. The easiest, most beginner-friendly way is to find a pattern. Most patterns include a suggested yarn section, so that's a great baseline to start. You can also freehand your knits. Friend, that's a little advanced. Ultimately, the question is, what do I need yarn for? Is this a safe space, friend? I love trendy knitting patterns. I don't care. If everyone is knitting it, it is just a matter of time before I will too. The Sailor Slippers by Annie Sews are having a major moment on socials right now, and I am having major FOMO. Ravelry, Coffee, Etsy are some of the most popular places to find patterns. A lot of indie designers have their own website, but there's a specific designer that you like, check that out. Like me, Bandwidth Bonnet on my website, link in the bio. My favorite underutilized resource to get free knitting patterns is the public library. My library has so many different pattern books. I also like using library books because you're able to discover patterns you probably wouldn't have come across otherwise. So now that we know what we're making, fiber and weight. So the fiber is the material that the yarn is made out of: wool, cotton, linen, etc. The weight is the thickness of the yarn. Your pattern will either include this info or the name of the yarn that the designer used. Then you can just look up the yarn and you'll find out the suggested fiber and weight. My pattern recommends that I use Drop Snow. Drop Snow is a 100% wool, super bulky yarn. If the pattern that you're making is made to measure or you're freehanding your knit, then you can use any yarn that you like. If there are a specific pair of needles that you want to use, you can see what weight of yarn is recommended for those needles. I know you've seen your faves and their immaculate wool makes, but before we follow suit, we have to ask the question, to wool or not to wool? Is wool right for you? And if not, what's a better alternative? When not to wool: if you're allergic, if wearing wool makes you feel uncomfortable, if you're making a hot weather knit most likely, and wool is an animal derivative, so there are many ethical reasons why someone would not use wool. Friend, there are so many alternatives to wool. The age-old debate: what's tea with acrylic yarn? Yarn choice is so deeply personal, and your knits are a reflection of you. If you choose acrylic yarn for whatever reason, that is your choice. The issue comes when you start hoarding it and you start over consuming it and you have more than you could ever use in a lifetime. Yes, acrylic yarn is plastic. Yes, plastic is bad for the environment, but your 3 balls of Red Heart Super Saver are not as damaging to the earth as just daily helicopter trips to Whole Foods, I promise, friend. I found this graphic on the pros and cons of the different yarn fibers and which ones work best for which weather. This is perfect if you want to use a yarn that's different than the suggested yarn in your pattern. The smaller the number, the thinner the yarn, the lighter the weight. Your pattern should include what weight to use. If you're freestyling it, you can use any weight that you want. For my slippers, my fiber is wool and my weight is super bulky. So using the pattern suggested yarn is the easiest and most ideal, but honestly, sometimes you can't. For my slippers, the suggested yarn is an overseas brand. Between the shipping and the extra fees, it just makes more sense for me to find an alternative. So now that we know what kind of yarn we're looking for, we need to find a place to shop. So what do I look for in an online yarn shop? Location. I prefer to use US-based companies to avoid crazy wait times and shipping fees. The website interface. Is it easy to browse? Are the categories clear and organized? Can I find the yarn that I'm looking for? Does it look like a scam site? Are they problematic? Okay, friends, so that's my criteria. Your criteria might be a little bit different. Maybe you prioritize customer reviews, and so you're looking for a website where that's the focal point. Find out what's important to you, find a retailer that meets most of those things, and then anytime you're looking for new yarn, you have your go-to place. Having your go-to place makes shopping for yarn so much easier. I think it takes a lot of the stress out having a place to start. If I buy my yarn online, it's either from Wool & Company or for Jimmy Bean's Wool. Friend, I know we're from all over the globe, so I put together a list of popular online yarn retailers from various regions of the planet. Disclaimer, I have never shopped at any of these retailers, so you have to take everything I say with a grain of salt. You cannot believe everything that you see online. You have to do your own research, but this is a good place to start. Also, your criteria for a yarn shop might be different, so keep that in mind. Shipping and returns and policies are the most boring part of buying anything online, but they're very important to know. What happens if you receive your sweater quantity of yarn and it doesn't meet your expectations? This is something to consider when you're finding your go-to spot. What is their return and their exchange policy? Is this something you're okay with? Okay, friend, really quick, before we start browsing all of these beautiful yarns, What is the budget? You have to have a budget. You do not want to get on the site and start getting distracted. You're going to see so many beautiful indie dyed, niche, never heard of underground brands and think, oh my goodness, I need it. But we have to think of the first rule. What do we need yarn for? If you don't have a project in mind, friend, let's try to stay focused. Whatever your budget is, you got to stick to your budget. Yarn is beautiful. I love spending my money on yarn just as much as the next person, but our livelihood comes first. Our financial responsibilities come first. Friend, before you start buying yarn online, what is your budget? Okay, so now that the boring stuff is out of the way, my favorite part, the yarn color. Did you know that you can have 2 yarns from the same brand, the same color name, and they still be different colors? Introducing our friend, the dye lot, and we have to keep a close eye on her. So the beloved dye lot. A dye lot is a batch of yarn that's dyed at the same time together. So different dye lots, different numbers, even if they're the same color, them being dyed at a different time shows up as a slight variation in a color. Sometimes it's noticeable, sometimes it's not. Think of it as baking a recipe. Maybe the weather is a little bit different outside. Maybe you left them in the oven for a minute longer. Different factors affect the dye lots, and that's why even though a yarn can have the exact same shade name and be from the exact same brand, if they're from a different dye lot, the color might vary slightly. So when you're buying, let's say, a sweater's quantity, multiple balls of yarn, you want to make sure that you buy them all at one time in hopes of getting the same dye lot. And I had to say in hopes because we both know that the real tragedy is when you order all of your yarn at the same time and you still end up with different dye lots. Your pattern should include how much yarn you need to make it. Here's a guide of common projects and an estimate of how much yarn you need to make them. Okay, so for my slippers, I'm gonna buy my yarn from Wool & Company. You can browse the yarn by weight and fiber. So I go to the top and it says yarn, and I'm gonna click on super bulky, and then where it says fiber type, I'm gonna click on wool. If you're using the same website, you'll do that, but for whatever your fiber and your weight is, if the site that you're using doesn't organize them like that, you can always type in the search bar. Once I find a list of yarns that will work, I just click on them all and I'll browse the colors and I'll look at the prices and see which ones work for me. If you want something with a little bit more structure, I suggest the website Yarn Sub. If your pattern includes a specific type of yarn to use, you can type in that yarn and then a list of similar yarns will come up, and that's a good place to start. So this is the time when I choose the color. So now that I have a list of yarns to work with, I like to just click on them and browse and go through the colors. First question we're asking ourselves when we're thinking of a color: is this a color that I would wear? If this is a gift for someone else, is this a color that they wear? Is the color that I'm thinking of practical? Maybe you're making something for a child. Most likely not going to use white yarn. Maybe you're knitting something for your super serious corporate friend. Is it practical to knit it in hot pink? Maybe if she has like a major elbow vibe going on. And in that case, girl, pop your So once I find yarns and colors that I like, what I like to do is I'll Google the name of the yarn and the color, or I'll look it up on Ravelry, and I try to find as many pictures of real life people posting the yarn as possible. We know that often the color we see on screen is not the color that it comes up in, so it's really helpful when you see multiple people post the same colors of yarn. It kind of gauges what is the true color of the yarn. This is also something you can do on Insta. If you go on the brand's page, under their tagged photos, you might be able to find someone who used the same yarn as you, and then you'll be able to kind of see what it looks like in real life as opposed to just on the screen. If you have any special criteria for your yarn, you might want to look online for reviews. Like maybe you're making a project that absolutely has to be compatible with the washing machine. You want to look for reviews of people who've owned that same yarn and see how the project they've made holds up in the washing machine. Brenda, back to our budget. Price is very important. For me personally, if I'm torn between 2 skeins and they're very similar in color, I'm gonna choose the one that's the least expensive. Know when to splurge, know when to save. Knitting does not have to cost an arm and a leg, friend. Okay, so after browsing, these are the colors that I really love. I'm gonna choose these, I think, for my sailor slippers. I always have so much fun choosing my yarn. One thing that I like to do with all of my knits is make a mood board. I feel like it really just channels like the vibe of the knit, and if it's a project that I'm buying yarn for, I like to make it while I wait for the yarn to arrive. I feel like it makes the time go a little bit faster too. Pattern came with this template so you can see the color placement and see what the colors look like next to each other. This is a really good idea, I think, for every project if you're able to draw it out. I like to screenshot the yarns and then make like little collages or frames to just see all of the colors together. Okay, so I'm really feeling these colors right now. I think these are the colors that I'm gonna choose. Before you finalize your yarn, does your project have any special instructions? For example, these slippers are gonna be felted in the end. Super wash wool does not felt. Does your project have any special instructions? If they do, you want to know that before you buy your yarn. And we check rent. In 3 to 5 business days, you're gonna have to sit down and unbox the yarn and start the sailor colors, slippers. I am dying to make them. I hope this guide makes online yarn shopping so easy for you. Let me know, is there anything that I forgot? What do you look for when you're shopping for yarn online? I will see you guys next week. Bye.